Kamala Harris has earned many distinctions during her lifetime, thanks in part to a strong mother, a supportive family, and possibly a significantly older boyfriend. But despite her accomplishments, she's also had her share of failures, including one that the world is still reckoning with today. Long before they became talking points of the 2024 presidential election, Kamala Harris's parents were just a couple of students at UC Berkeley in California. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was a cancer researcher who had emigrated from India, and her father, Donald Harris, was a native of Jamaica who was studying economics. The two married, and Shyamala gave birth to Kamala and her younger sister Maya before she and Donald eventually divorced. As Kamala wrote in her memoir, The Truths We Hold, her father played a role in his children's lives, but it was Shyamala who, quote, was the one most responsible for shaping us into the women we would become. While the two sisters lived with their mother in Berkeley, Kamala would take a bus each morning to a school in a more affluent neighborhood due to a program intended to desegregate public schools in Berkeley. In her memoir, Kamala talked about how it was important to her mother that she get the best education she could. She knew that her adopted homeland would see Maya and me as Black girls, and she was determined to make sure we would grow into confident, proud Black women.
She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it.
While Shyamala Harris had the foresight to know how her daughters would be viewed as Black women in America, it was still important to her that they know about their Indian heritage as well. That included trips to India, where she met relatives and visited her grandparents, who Harris said would talk to her about the importance of civil rights and fighting for democracy. Shyamala also made sure that her girls were well-versed in their father's background. So Kamala and Maya found themselves in the unique position of attending both Baptist church services and worshiping at a Hindu temple. Kamala discussed that childhood experience in a 2017 speech at an Atlanta church, saying that her experience with Hinduism allowed her to, quote, see that all faiths teach us to pursue justice. It doesn't take a detective to see where Harris's interests in social justice came from. Growing up with both parents being active in the civil rights movement, it was ingrained into her to fight back against injustices, no matter how young she was. When Harris was 13, her mother had taken a job teaching at Montreal's McGill University, and the apartment building that the family lived in enforced a policy that prohibited children from playing on the lawn. Since playing outside on lawns is something, kids historically do, Harris and her younger sister felt that the policy was unfair and staged a protest, which succeeded. Harris's passion for activism didn't end in her teenage years either. After attending Howard University, she went on to get a law degree from UC Hastings College of the Law in San Francisco. While it might have been tempting to join a private firm and rake in the cash from a fancy office, Harris instead joined the Alameda County District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor in Oakland, California. Her work there paid off when, in 2004, she was elected as San Francisco's District Attorney, with the high-profile position instantly catapulting Harris into a rising star within California's Democratic Party. During her years as a prosecutor, Harris captured public attention with her personal life in addition to her professional accomplishments when she began dating San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. Although he was separated from his wife at the time he dated Harris, Brown was still technically married, and also nearly 3 decades Harris's senior. He was also one of California's most renowned political kingmakers. So even though the relationship ended after about a year in 1995, questions about how much influence Brown had on Harris's skyrocketing political career remained, even decades later. In 2019, Brown decided to respond to rumors of political impropriety in an op-ed published in the San Francisco Chronicle, writing, "Yes, we dated. It was more than 20 years ago. Yes, I may have influenced her career by appointing her to 2 state commissions when I was Assembly Speaker." Brown's argument, however, was that Harris was simply one of many California politicians he helped out, including Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, although so far there's been no word on how many dates those two went on with Brown. Continuing her rise through the California legal system, Harris ran for the position of Attorney General of California in 2010 against Los Angeles DA Steve Cooley. On election night, with results in from 99% of the precincts, Cooley went with the bold move of prematurely declaring himself the winner, even though Harris was ahead by more than 20,000 votes. Cooley conceded 3 weeks later, when he finally realized that numbers mean something and that Harris had 74,000 more votes. Though to be fair, that amounted to a margin of less than 1 percentage point. Regardless, with her victory, Harris became both California's first female and first woman of color Attorney General. During her term as California's Attorney General, Kamala Harris found herself in another significant relationship when she met Doug Emhoff, an entertainment lawyer based in Los Angeles. After about a year of dating, Harris announced that she and the divorced father of two had gotten engaged. Harris and Emhoff were married in the Santa Barbara County Courthouse on August 22, 2014. With the union, Harris became both a newlywed and a stepmother for Emhoff's two children from his first marriage, Cole and Ella. By all accounts, the relationship she has with her stepchildren is as solid as it gets. As Harris wrote in an essay for Elle, "I was already hooked on Doug, but I believe it was Cole and Ella who reeled me in." The tight relationship even earned her a new nickname from the siblings, Momala. But even though they seem happy to have her in their lives, having an attorney general as a parent has its drawbacks. Cole told the New York Times, "I remember I saw a tweet that someone did, a photo of Kamala at the Kavanaugh hearing. And someone tweeted like, 'I'd hate to have to look at that face that explained why I'm late for curfew.' And I was thinking, I've literally had to do that." 2 years after she was re-elected as Attorney General in 2014, Harris's political ambitions reached new heights when she ran for a California Senate seat that had been vacated due to the retirement of incumbent Barbara Boxer. Unlike her first AG run, Harris earned a decisive victory, with 67% of the votes over Republican challenger Loretta Sanchez. Harris quickly found herself in the national spotlight when she utilized her skills as a prosecutor in the confirmation hearings of Republican Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. She grilled the now Supreme Court Justice on past allegations of sexual assault and his views on women's rights to bodily autonomy.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
Her performance during the hearings made her both fans and one big enemy. Donald Trump utilized his favorite way to describe women when he said of Harris, "She was nasty to a level that was just a horrible thing. The way she treated now Justice Kavanaugh, and I won't forget that soon." With the 2020 presidential election looming, Kamala Harris threw her hat in the ring for the Democratic primaries, finding herself going up against seasoned Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden, a former longtime senator and Barack Obama's vice president. Harris's big moment during her campaign came during the first primary debate, when she went after Biden and his record on segregation, specifically when it came to him opposing busing students in from other areas to racially integrate schools in the 70s. In her argument, Harris brought up one specific little girl who was part of the second class to integrate her public school in California.
And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
The moment had people wondering if it would help catapult her to the nomination, but her campaign couldn't keep up the momentum, nor the necessary fundraising. She dropped out of the race in December 2019. Despite being on the wrong end of Harris's attack, Biden was ultimately declared the Dems' presidential candidate, and he apparently liked what he saw in his former opponent, as he selected Harris as his pick for vice president. Ultimately, the Biden-Harris ticket won, and Kamala added another first to her list of accomplishments, becoming America's first female vice president. As their first term in office was coming to an end, problems began to arise for the Biden-Harris ticket when it came to re-election, mostly in the form of people realizing that Biden is really old. Biden was America's oldest sitting president at 82, and he was already facing plenty of questions about his mental sharpness and acuity. But it all came crashing down during his first presidential debate with Donald Trump. The debate was an outright disaster for Biden, who stumbled over words, appeared confused and disoriented, and somehow made Trump seem like the more put-together of the two.
Everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Immediately, the Democratic National Committee went into crisis mode, with many pundits and politicians on the left urging Biden to drop out. Though Biden initially refused, the calls for him to step aside grew loud enough that he couldn't ignore them any longer. He announced that he would not be seeking re-election and that in his place he would be endorsing Harris, who became the Democratic nominee. Americans turned out in near historic numbers to vote in the 2024 presidential election, and when the dust settled, voters had decided that it was time to go back to former president and convicted felon Donald Trump. It was a victory that promised major ramifications for not just his own numerous legal issues, but for America, and as we've come to find out, the entire world.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for,
Harris does deserve credit for accepting the results without instigating an attack on the Capitol, but it was still a bitter pill to swallow that must have hit her hard, considering that she declined to speak to supporters on election night when the results were looking grim for her campaign. To add insult to injury, it was Harris herself who had to preside over the Senate's certification of her defeat. After her defeat, Kamala Harris faced a future tinged with uncertainty. After achieving success and numerous victories throughout her political career, recovering from a devastating loss like the one she experienced had experts and pundits questioning what lies ahead in her future. The answer, at least initially, seems to be simple: get it all down on paper. Sources told NBC News that her first order of business was to write a book about her brief 107-day presidential campaign in hopes of repositioning herself for another, hopefully more successful, run for president. Speaking to the outlet, Keith Urban, the president of the literary agency Javelin, not the country singer, had news that would hopefully serve as a silver lining to Harris. Kamala Harris is poised to land the biggest book deal of any vice president in history. Democratic strategist Kate Mader spoke to The Hill about Harris's future, and she remained optimistic, saying she still has a long career ahead of her. She's young for politics in this country, and I think that folks are really excited to see what she does next, because she's built such a powerful following around her. And I think that will carry through after the election. As to whether or not another presidential run is on the horizon, a former Biden advisor threw some cold water on all the optimism and offered a sobering reminder to BBC, saying, "People forget that had there been a real primary, she never would have been the nominee. Everyone knows that,